listening to the Project Ignite podcast,
where real digital entrepreneurs reveal their very best tips, tools, and strategies to help you ignite and grow your online business.
ProjectIgnite.com. Your digital business starts here.
Now, here's your host, Derek Gale.
Welcome to the Project Ignite podcast. You guys know the drill. We skip the hype, we skip the BS. I bring you real experts, entrepreneurs, people that you can learn from to help you grow your business. This is your host, Derek Gale, and today we're going to be diving into a topic that I'm actually really interested in, and that's introverts, and more particularly introverts in business, networking for introverts, and I've chased this guest down because I wanted to personally have this conversation with them. And honestly, that's why I like podcasts. I get to call cool people and have conversations with them. Now, for the listeners that know me well, you may be wondering why I'm interested in talking about introverts in business. And to be totally honest, guys, it's something I've struggled with my entire career. I'm an introvert, and networking kills me. Now, I know for those of you who know me, you might be thinking, but you host a podcast, you speak at conferences all over the world, and I have for the past 20 years in front of hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. I've got a company. I've got right now over 60 employees, and if you add on contractors, well over 100 people working for me. So you're probably wondering, how the hell am I an introvert? And I'm going to let you in on a little secret that a lot of people don't know, and that is this. I figured out really early on, for example, that for me, public speaking was the fastest way to sell a ton of product without having to sit down and speak to people one-on-one and do that whole networking thing. I figured out that the internet was like a fantastic way to make an incredible income without having to face customers one-on-one. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I know how to sell. One of the things that actually drove me to the internet was when I was 19, I had a job doing door-to-door sales, and I was good at it, but I absolutely hated it. And look, I'm not going to name names, but I know lots of well-known digital entrepreneurs that chose this whole path of online business because they're introverts as well. I mean, some of them actually, have diagnosed social anxiety, but you see them on videos, you see them online, or maybe at conferences. So look, for online entrepreneurs like myself, that are introverts, the whole internet was like a dream come true. But I hit a ceiling, and I figured out that if you want to get to that next level in your business, you really got to get out of that comfort zone. And that's hard for introverts, but the entrepreneurs that are the most successful over time build a network of other successful people around them. And I mean, it's funny, if you think of to the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, one of his principles of success that successful people have in common is building a network of people, which he kind of called the mastermind. And so that's why I think today's guest is going to be such an important resource for all of us introverts out there, all of us people that are a little bit more on the shy side. I mean, Forbes calls this guy the real deal on the Global Gurus list, has him as a top 30 sales professional. Top Sales World magazine named him as a top 50 speaker. And the list goes on. And he's the best-selling author of the book, there's a couple now, The Introvert's Edge, which hit the Amazon's chart as the 8th most sold book of the week, appears on HubSpot's list of most highly rated sales books of all time, and was selected by Book Authority as number 2 best introvert book of all time. And he's got a new book, which we're going to be digging into today, which is The Introvert's Edge to Networking. And it's already received incredible endorsements from Harvard, if you haven't heard of that, Princeton, Neil Patel, Michael Gerber. Again, the list goes on. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Matthew Pollard to the show. Matthew, thank you so much for being here today.
Mate, I'm ecstatic to be here. Thanks for having me on. I have to say, it's probably the best introduction I've had. Funnily enough, you're an introvert, right? So maybe you planned a little bit in advance as opposed to that extrovert that just goes gung-ho.
Oh, totally. Oh, God, I absolutely do. For sure. You sit down and go, okay, what am I going to say, right? So I don't look like an ass.
Absolutely. And I think that's important. I'm so happy that you mentioned you're an introvert straight out of the gate, because, I think it's so important that people understand that people like you that probably don't come across as an introvert, because everyone knows that introvert's just hiding under that bridge, right? Not talking to anyone, that you're actually an introvert and you can do these things. We've got to stop projecting extroversion on anyone that we see as successful.
Totally. And like I said, people don't realize, especially in the world of the digital marketing guys and the gurus and stuff like that, when you peel back the layers, all of us are typically very shy, anxiety, all sorts of, and that's why we were forced to be good at this internet thing, right? And it sent us down this path. But there's this misconception because they see you up on stage and doing these different things, and they go, "Well, I can't do that. I'm an introvert." I'm like, hell yeah, you can. It's actually better.
Yeah, and it is so much better. Some of the biggest podcasters, some of the best shows that I've been on, they're introverted because they plan their shows. They don't just get the guest up and just have an unstructured conversation. They're very specific about the dialogue. I mean, people like Jamie Masters, who has the Eventual Millionaire podcast, great friend of mine, she used to get this rash on the side of her face during interviews. She'd tell people up front because people would stop in the middle of the interview and say, "I think something's going wrong. Like, you need to go and see a doctor." So she had to tell people up front. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter where you look. If you look at people like Oprah Winfrey, if you can't small talk, she was an introvert. If you look at people like Bill Murray, that funny guy that you see in Ghostbusters, in Groundhog Day, he's an introvert. Leonardo DiCaprio, Zig Ziglar, the most well-known sales trainer on the planet, introverted. Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, the most 10,000 membership groups across the globe, he's an introvert. So the thing that we have as an issue is that we put this wall up and say we don't have this gift of gab, and therefore we can't. Though the introverts that are planning, that are preparing, that have systems to succeed, well, not only do they not have problems doing these activities, they actually excel at them. Doesn't mean they're not tired afterwards. Many of them enjoy it, but more like a kid at Disneyland. They've enjoyed the ride, they're tired afterwards.
So that brings me to an interesting point, point of conversation here. So it's not that introverts don't necessarily enjoy it, but they're freaking exhausted when they're done.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm enjoying this conversation.
Yes.
I enjoyed our dialogue that we had before it. And by the end of this, we're going to get to a point where you'll have to say, "Matt, we have to stop talking now. The show's over." I will have a ball. Like when I speak from stage, I have a great time. And, Bill, the founder of UGG Boots, Brian Smith, I've got a podcast called The Introvert's Edge, and I interview him, and we talk about the fact that he spoke on my stage, Small Business Festival, and he was like an hour in. We had to get him off the stage because he was having such a great time, and the event, people wanted to go home, right? Now, the thing was he having fun? Absolutely. Did he afterwards analyze everything and go, could I have been better? Could I have done things differently? Was he tired? Absolutely. Was I tired? Absolutely. And I think that's the difference. Like after this show, I have 30 minutes scheduled where I guarantee I'm going to be putting on a hoodie, switching on Netflix, and I won't talk to anyone for that 30-minute period. All these lights will go off the window, the blinds will come down, and that will be my recharge time. Now, I hope that people feel that I'm really energetic now. That's a combination of a few things. It's a combination of me doing what I'm truly passionate about and following the mission that I love to follow. Because introverts, if we're not connected with that, a lot of times we feel inauthentic and incongruent, and therefore we won't push ourselves to do these things. A lot of planning and preparation, because if you think this is the first time I've had this conversation, you're wrong. While I hope it sounds dynamic to everyone that's listening, I've planned, I've prepared, I've practiced so that I don't say something that I'm going to regret later and go, why did I say that? Or why did I say it that way? And then I will go through the motions of doing what I'm doing right now. And then afterwards, I plan repair time, because if I go straight into something else, I'm going to be emotionally fractured. And that means that I'm not going to be at my best. So knowing your energy levels, doing that planning and preparation allows you to not be someone that you're not, but just be the best version of yourself in the most authentic and congruent way you know how to be.
Okay. So that's awesome. Now, and we're going to dive deep here. Let's take a step back, though, and go introvert. What is an introvert? How do you define it? Because I've heard different definitions. What is your definition of an introvert?
See, I think this is the biggest problem when it comes to anybody talking about this personality type. I think that researchers for the longest time have been given grant money to make it more and more complicated. So if you want to spend months researching, you can totally do that, or you can just inherit the way I see it. It's where you draw your energy from. So if you go to a networking event at the end, you're charged up and you're the one suggesting, hey, let's go to the bar and let's catch up and talk some more. Guess what? You're an extrovert. If you get to the end and you're wiped for energy, then you're an introvert. Again, it doesn't mean you can't do anything. Now, put this in clarity for everybody. Everybody has their burdens to bear, right? And extroverts, some might say they're not the best listeners. They are, perhaps not the most empathetic people in the world. While introverts think they don't have gift of gab, they can't strike rapport, even though, funnily enough, statistics say that introverts build the most rapport with people because they build deeper relationships. We all have our burdens to bear. The difference is that an extrovert will say, I'm not that great at empathy. I'll go and learn how to empathize better. I'll go and learn to actively listen more. And HR, if we're working in a big organization, will send us to go and learn those skills. But everyone goes, oh, poor Matthew, he's an introvert. He can't do that. We won't send him to learn. And Matthew won't go and learn for himself because he believes he can't. So if you just lose energy from being with people, where, of course, there's all these classifications of shy, highly sensitive. We can complicate the water as much as we want. But in truth, if you lose energy from being with people, know that you need to charge yourself up and know you need a system. It doesn't mean that you can't. And I would just define it that way. If you get tired from being with people, you're an introvert.
And I think that's my favorite definition because that's the one that resonates the most with me. And it's anybody who's an introvert. And I think, okay, so I think there's a lot of mistaking shy for introversion.
Absolutely. I mean, there are extroverts that can be shy.
Exactly.
The thing is that I think that a lot of people will say, well, I hear this all the time. Oh, I used to be introverted and now I'm not anymore. And it's like, well, why do you think you're not? Well, I actually enjoy being at networking events. Well, no, you probably just learned the system and you got better at it because you planned, you prepared, and you went to more and now you're better at it. You don't lose being introverted. You don't lose being extroverted. Now, there are things like social anxiety and shyness that are different burdens to bear, and there are different skill sets to overcoming those things. Now, that is not what I'm an expert in. What I'm an expert in is introversion specifically and helping people learn those strategies. However, I will say that being shy a lot of times means that you're worried about putting the wrong step forward. You're worried about being seen in the wrong light. Social anxiety has a lot to do with negative self-talk. So most of the strategies that work for introverts also work for those types of people, but there's a lot more mindset elements to it. And, there are amazing tools. And you talked about Think and Go Rich, and, at the end they talk about, affirmations and reprogramming the brain. There's a lot of work you can do, and introverts benefit from this as well, because in truth, if you're sitting there saying, I can't do this, I can't succeed, I'm too old for this, people see me different, I guarantee there's a quote by Henry Ford who says, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right. And the truth is that if you're telling yourself that you can't, you're going to be right. If you tell yourself that you can and start looking for ways to do it, actually there's a conference called the Quiet and Influential Summit that Fifi Mason and I co-hosted together this year. It's actually happening right now. And, I interviewed a guy called Mark Metry, and he talked about having crippling social anxiety. And then he realized he didn't understand enough about his brain and why his brain was causing him to have this crippling anxiety. He researched and he realized that there was some nutrition factors, so he fixed it. He realized there was some psychology issues, so he focused on positive affirmations. And then he made the choice to not let it control him anymore. And funnily enough, now he speaks from stage. He's got a book. He's out doing interviews. He's very, very successful at what he does. But he was, and this is the one thing I would suggest regardless. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're introverted or what's going on in your life. Decide not to be an effect of that problem and give up the responsibility of fixing it. Decide to be at cause, make the decision that you are responsible for fixing whatever deficits you feel that you have. Realize that they're not deficits, they're just, you have other advantages, and leverage those advantages to become the success you know you deserve to be.
Yes, that was amazing. Yeah, look, I listening to, and we haven't gotten deep into your systems and stuff like that, but I suspect that, as you said, yes, shyness, social anxiety is a whole different thing. But if you're shy or you're introverted, the more you prepare and the more you practice, the more confidence you have in anything. And I think, again, it's a mistake people make. They look at people like you or myself, and we speak on stages and stuff. They don't realize, A, the amount of preparation that went into getting us up there, or the first time we did it, how terrified we were.
I can show you. There's actually a video buried in deep in my YouTube channel of my first keynote presentation.
Yeah.
And it's still public, actually. But I remember, for the video listeners, I can literally replicate it. But the stage was about so big, and I walked like this the whole way through with my arms. It was horrible. I was like a ping pong ball bouncing off the sides. And I must have said okay and about 1,000 times. It was 20 minutes. Right? If I would have been counting them, if there was someone from Toastmasters, their mind would have exploded, I think. But, over time I learned, and what's funny is I actually edited my own podcast, my first podcast, The Better Business Coach. And every time I said or I personally edited it out. And it was an ordeal. I remember a 20-minute episode took me, maybe an hour and a half to edit all the ums and and make it seem glitch free.
Yeah.
And then I had one of my friends reach out and go, the word "and" is kind of like saying So I went back and I edited those out. When you see me speak from stage, I don't say or anything like that because of the ordeal that I put myself through. Now, most people don't do that. I mean, I learned how to sell, in door-to-door sales, but I learned by watching YouTube videos. That's a whole other story we can chat about later. But literally, it's me taking responsibility and putting obscene amounts of effort. Now, we live in this world of that grinded out hustle mentality. Effort and grinding it out without a great strategy is a waste, right? A lot of times we put energy into things feeling like we're moving forward, but I just call that busy procrastination. We have to have a plan and a strategy to become successful, but then we need to be relentless at getting through it. The one thing I've realized, though, is when you take a great system and a great process, again, don't take advice on how to speak from stage from an extrovert. Brian Smith did that, and he was like, it just felt so inauthentic. Yeah. I said, just tell stories, be yourself, and learn the introverted method. It transformed the way he spoke from stage. If you follow somebody that is like you, that has the same personality, temperament as you, and take advice from them, and then exert a huge amount of energy towards mastering the art, you will dominate in whatever you do. As you said, I'm listed as one of the top 50 speakers in the world. If I show you a video of my first keynote, you'd be like, that guy's never going to speak from stage again. So you absolutely can do it.
Yeah. It's so funny when you're telling that story about your first, literally the exact same story. Bounced from side of the stage to the other side of the stage, couldn't sit still, didn't really look at the audience. And it's funny, to this day, I still cannot actually remember the period of time I was on the stage because I was so just out there and terrified, right?
What's interesting, though, when you did that, did people say to you how good you were afterwards?
Yes, and that's the funny part, right? You're like, I bombed. People are like, I got so much. You're like, really?
And that's the other thing. Introverts, we judge ourselves so much. And if we plan and prepare, we can look at ourselves in the mirror as we're doing it. We go, oh my gosh, I'm flying my hands around. Stop that. But the things that we judge ourselves on is like that fringe 5% that most people don't actually care about. Sure, they notice that you don't do it and they go, this person's, a perfection machine. They're amazing at what they do. But when what's coming out of your mouth is well thought out and clear and it has great concepts, if you just go out on, social media today and record a video, sure, you might get somebody that says, hey, you're waving your hands around too much, but 9 times out of 10, you're going to get someone sending a message going, that really meant something to me. Because introverts especially, they like to say things meaningful when the camera switches on, and that makes what they have to say so much more profound.
So do you think introverts struggle with this more than the extroverts because there's a deeper fear of failure and rejection than, say, an extrovert?
Well, introverts are predominantly more internalized people. So yes, extroverts, it's actually the aftermath. So we feel rejection more. So yes, we feel that, but we also critique everything. We relive things. And that's actually a positive thing. So I'll give you, the reason why I say this is, for me, when I spoke from stage, I got cameras to come. And while it was mortifying to see how many times I bounced off and saw the camera guys struggling to keep up with me, I got to watch it and reflect on it. Now, that actually gave me a real world reflection, because what I built up in my head about what I did was so much worse than even that. However, even when we reflect, what happens again, without a system, we just say, oh, I'm not really good at speaking. I'm bad at this. And one of the things you'll find with my book on sales, my book on networking, the way I speak from stage, is when it's a system, this is really powerful for an introvert, because when it's a system, it's an external process, which means a rejection isn't something personal. It's, oh, what broke in the system?
Yes.
We can use our analytical mind. So what happens is, yes, introverts, by far, we punish ourselves a lot more about everything that we do, even if we did it well, because we have that analytical mind that goes ticking afterwards that says, why didn't you do this? You should have said this. Why didn't you say that? However, it's actually a superpower if we stop it being a reflection and judgmental on ourselves and aim it towards a system and perfecting it. That's what makes us so gosh darn good at it.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I know there's people listening to this right now that are actually breathing a sigh of relief going, holy crap, I thought it was just me.
I think everybody thought it was just them until they realized more than 50% of the world, well, almost 50% of the world's economy is introverted. I mean, you know, it's National Introverts Week this week. You know, on the 2nd of January, it's Global Introverts Week. The thing that I've been excited to see is that there are a lot of people now, you know, shining the light. I mean, I actually founded National Introverts Week because I wanted to shine a light on the topic, because what I found is, while Susan Cain wrote an amazing book saying, hey, be proud of the fact that you're an introvert, a lot of the books after that became more, poor you're an introvert, let me show you how to survive. And I'm like, forget survive, let me show you how to dominate, because we have these amazing skills. But what I've been excited to see is how many introverted coaches and mentors and authors that are now coming out, and people like yourself that are willing to now proudly say, you know, I'm an introvert. You know, Jeb Blunt, who wrote the foreword for my new book, he said, you know, funnily enough, most of the people in the upper echelon of the sales training community are actually introverted. You know, I said Zig Ziglar, but Jeb Blunt is an introvert. Paul Smith is an introvert. There's a ton of them. Now there's extroverts too, like Grant Cardone, the Wolf of Wall Street, obviously very, very extroverted. Yeah. But I mean, this isn't new stuff. The top 10% of all sales presenters have a planned presentation. Who plans more? Introverts.
Yep.
So the thing that I will say, though, is what Jeb said is that I was really the first person in the sales world to really own up to it. And I thought I was going to get slammed for it, especially when I said introverts can outsell their extroverted counterparts. What was interesting is to see the swell of support around everyone that went, yes, I believe that, me too. And I think the biggest thing, if you're listening to this, if you are an introvert, the first thing I want you to realize is that you are not alone. But the second thing is I want you to post on social media that you are an introvert and you're amazing at doing this so-called extroverted arena activity, because the truth is there'll be somebody else that feels like they're alone, that thinks that they can't, and you're going to inspire them to show them that they can.
That's awesome. Okay, so all right, now we've been talking, I guess, public speaking, just because we've both been there. But let's drill down into a scenario where I think most of our listeners are going to go, I've been there. So let me give you a scenario, okay? So let's come up with a character. We'll call him Pete. You could probably call him Derek because I've been in this a million times. So Pete's starting a business. He's created a product. He knows he needs to get out there to events and to meetups and stuff like that, and he needs to start selling his product to vendors that'll carry his product or something like that. So he finds a big event and goes, okay, there's going to be lots of great potential partners for me there. He buys his ticket, he buys his airfare, he gets on his plane, he flies to this event, checks into his hotel, goes down to the conference room, looks around, and then spends the next 3 days trying to avoid eye contact with people, having the odd awkward interaction, and just waiting to get back to his hotel room, and leaves there with nothing. But is a fly on the wall watching all these extroverts flutter around, effortlessly connecting with one another.
I'm feeling anxious thinking about what you said.
Yeah, because I've been there, and even now, like I still go to conference like, okay, here's what we have to do, and thank God my wife's an extrovert, so a lot of times I'll bring her. I'll be like, okay, you go and just bring people to me, right? But what is your system? What do you teach people?
Well, firstly, don't feel like you need to be more extroverted. That's the first thing that I want you to take on here, because here's the thing that I find what people do. They look at those extroverts that are doing well, but a lot of these extroverts are doing what I call transactional networking, which basically walking around, do you want to buy from me? No. What about you? What about you? What about you? No one wants to be that person. Now, a lot of introverts feel that they have to be that person when they just lose their job or their pipeline's looking a little bit thin and they've got their own business and they need to eat what they kill, right? So they feel like they need to do that. But until then, a lot of them move away from that and they do what I call aimless networking. Now, aimless networking is those people that kind of walk into networking rooms and somebody asks what they do and they kind of humbly explain it if they explain it at all. They have a lot of shallow conversations. They walk out with a chunk of business cards that they put on their desk and go, oh, I'm not going to call anyone. There was no real relationships there. If they call me, I'll work with them, which of course they never do. And then they say networking doesn't work. Well, of course it works. You're just doing it wrong. What I introduce is what's called strategic networking. Firstly, this is not something you can decide you're going to do 20 minutes before the event and then all of a sudden be amazing at the moment you walk in. What I find a lot of introverts especially do is they're like, okay, I have to go to a networking event. I need to get a client. They book that networking event or they book the flight to go to that networking event. And then it's the furthest thing from their mind because they don't want to think about it until they got to get in the car and go there. And then they try and put off the going. They try to talk themselves out of going. Eventually they get in. And funnily enough, they walk up to somebody because it's the first person they see. That person sells insurance. And oh my gosh, networking doesn't work because all we're going to talk about is insurance for the next 20 minutes. Well, of course, failing was it was always going to happen if you do it that way. So I'll give you an example of how it's done differently. I had a client of mine, Wendy, who she taught kids and adults Mandarin out of California. And she came to me, she's like, Matt, firstly, I need help with sales and networking, but I need to learn tactics to lock in more deals because here's what I'm experiencing. I've been successfully closing deals for $50 to $80 an hour for language coaching for the last decade. But now there are all these people moving into California that are willing to charge $30 to $40 an hour for private consultation. Not only that, thanks to this new global economy we live in, there's people in China offering to do it for $12 an hour on Craigslist. And thanks to our friends in Silicon Valley, there are people offering to do it for free. You teach me Mandarin, I'll teach you English. We won't charge anyone anything. So she's like, what tactics can I learn when I go into the networking room? And I'm like, well, the problem is that if there's nothing separating you, if you commoditize yourself like that, then it's really a long spiral to the bottom. I mean, let's face it, if I walk in and say I'm a sales trainer, people are going to look at me like I'm one step above a scam artist because no one likes sales trainers. If I say I'm a marketer, go, oh, I need marketing advice. How much do you cost? And now we're talking about price, which is what Wendy was finding. I said, so let's look at the things you do above and beyond. And I looked at, she had hundreds of clients over the years. But what I discovered is there were two people specifically she helped with far more than just language tuition. The first thing she helped them with, and these were executives being relocated to China, but she helped them understand the importance of rapport in China. Like if we're in the Western world and we're trying to sell something to someone, at the end of a 45-minute meeting, if we're really bad at sales, we'll say something horrible like, so do you want to move forward? And they'll say, yes, no, everyone's favorite. Let me think about it, right? Well, if I go back a week from now and say, hey, do you want to move forward now? And you still say you want to think about it, I know my chances of getting that sale are going down and down. Well, in China, they're going to want to meet with you 5 or 6 times. They're probably going to want to see you drunk over karaoke once or twice. I mean, all this before they even discuss business. But they're talking 50 to 100-year deals, not 12, 24-month relationships. So they want to know the character of the person. She helped them understand that, the difference between e-commerce in China and the West, in the Eastern world, I should say, the difference of the respect that's required, like how to handle a business card, why you have to reduce your accent, not just learn the language. And I'm like, Wendy, you do so much more for these people than just language tuition. What are you doing? And she's like, they're just a few things. I'm just trying to help. And I said, but you're stuck in your functional skill. Is it fair to assume as the result of the help that you're giving these people, they're going to be more successful in China? And she's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's the point, right? I said, great. Why don't we call you the China success coach then? So when you meet people, instead of saying you're a language tutor, which automatically gets them to put you in the don't need bucket or the I need, how much do you cost? They're going to have a brain aneurysm. Like, what's that? I've never heard of that before. So she loved the idea of that. And we created what we called the 5-week China Success Intensive, which is working with any executive spouse and to be relocated to China. And she loved the idea of this. And she's like, well, who do I sell it to? And I said, well, who do you think you sell it to? Now, this is critical because she said, well, obviously it's the executive. And I went, yeah, I mean, I would have been terrified moving from, I was moving from Australia to the US. Imagine going to China where they don't even speak the language. I said, great idea for customer. And she would have gone to networking events trying to sell to the executive. I said, but that's not your ideal client. She's like, obviously the organizations would pay. And I said, well, yeah, I mean, these people a lot of times, have millions of dollars riding on the executive being successful, but it's still not your ideal client. She's like frustrated. She's like, well, who then? I said, your ideal client is the immigration attorney. I mean, think about it. These people have $5,000 to $7,000 to make, but they've got to get the customer, do all the paperwork, all the bureaucracy that goes with it. They've got staff, office expenses. They'd be lucky to make $3,000. I said, so just offer them $3,000 for a successful introduction. So she'd start going to networking events and introducing herself as the China success coach. She then started talking about her passion and mission for helping executives and then getting into stories of these executives and the things that she was teaching them. I love the idea. She started offering them $3,000 for a simple introduction. They're like, double my profit? For a simple introduction, what have I got to say? She said, all you got to do is say, congratulations, you've now got a visa. I just want to double check you're as ready as possible to be relocated to China. Well, the executive would say, we got our place organized. We're learning the language. Kids are getting pretty good at it too. We've got our visa. I think we're set. And they just respond with, there's a lot more to it than that. I think you need to speak to the China success coach. I mean, when you get on the phone with someone terrified to go, an organization motivated to pay, and recommended by their attorney. She charged $30,000 for doing this 5-week intensive instead of hustling every day to charge $50 to $80 an hour. $27,000 profit by being the only logical choice. So the key is when you think about networking, a lot of people are in the wrong rooms explaining what they do in a functional way. What you've got to do is say, first, what are the things I do above and beyond my functional skill? Then what's the higher level benefit of that? And you create what I call your unified message, your version of the China success coach, or what I call, because if I say I'm a sales trainer, a marketing specialist, and master in NLP, firstly, it's confusing. And secondly, no one cares. But when I say I'm the rapid growth guy, that gets me heard in a crowded marketplace. Then you have to know your niche because you've got to go to networking events where they hang out. Wendy would have been to anyone looking for Mandarin education. Now she goes just where immigration attorneys hang out. I work with introverted service providers. That's what I specialize in. Once you have that, you can then start to research the right networking events to go to. By the way, still, you need planning. Look at what networking events are out there. Then connect with some of them on LinkedIn. Like what I find is everyone's got a meetup page these days, or everyone's got a LinkedIn group page or a Facebook group page. I can connect with people on Facebook, on LinkedIn before I go, saying, hey, I saw you were at that event last, thinking about going. Would you recommend this as a place where my ideal niche goes? Maybe share a little bit about my passion and mission for helping that demographic of people. Then when I get there, instead of walking into the insurance salesman, I know who the insurance salesman is. So I'm going to steer clear of that person and walk right up to the person that knows me.
That's brilliant. So, okay. So, as an introvert, and I hear this all the time from people when I've talked about this is, okay, so you've just given people an amazing system there. And I agree with everything you said, especially the part about differentiating yourself, because if you don't differentiate yourself, you're just another guy, and the conversation immediately goes to price or people glaze over. So finding something unique to differentiate yourself. Now, that being said, when the person walks into the room, how do they start the conversations? How do they connect with those people? Because this is the wall that I see people put up, and they don't even know how to get that conversation started. So the question gets asked of, what do you do?
Absolutely. So the first thing is you don't walk up to someone and go, I'm the rapid growth guy. How you doing? Right? So
okay.
The whole goal is you've done this planning to be armed and ready for when they ask.
Okay.
The goal, though, is to be interested before you be interesting.
Yes.
Now, the reason for that is we're trying to build up, if you like, the law of reciprocity bank, right? The goal for us is to foster that relationship. Now, here's the key. If I have connected with people beforehand, I literally have been through the scenario you're talking about where I've flown into an event and I literally will open up the events app before I go and I'll look at all the people that are going, and I've reached out to people beforehand on LinkedIn saying, hey, we should catch up for a coffee, or, I'm really excited. I hope we run into each other at the event, or, hey, I'm really, I'm coming to this event because I'm really interested and passionate about this. Is this a really good event for me to come to? I'm starting these dialogues before I even walk into the room. Mm-hmm. So instead of walking into the room with a bunch of people I don't know, feeling like I've got to talk about myself, well, a ton of these people have already connected with me, which means they may have already looked at my LinkedIn profile, because it's pretty hard to accept the connection without at least looking at that, sub-headline of who they are. Now, once I have an understanding of that connection. Now, of course, if you don't, you can still walk into a room. But when you have a dialogue, start asking them questions. Ask them what they do. Give them value. Talk about some of the relationships that you have that might be helpful to them, right? You've got to start realizing that by just being excited about whatever they're excited about, offering some unsolicited advice and say, look, feel free, this is unsolicited advice. If you're welcome to completely ignore that. But if I was in your situation, I would really feel that this strategy might help me. me. Oh, this person I know, I think would really be able to help you get some more traction there. Or, oh, you're looking for a podcast? I actually know this great guy, Derek. I was just on his show. Such a great interview. I'll introduce the two of you. Be helpful. Offer them energy. Sometimes people never speak to someone that's just not doing anything else but just going through the motions. So that's powerful. Eventually you get to this point where they're like, oh my gosh, Matt, I can't believe we've been speaking for 15 minutes. I haven't even asked you what you do.
Yeah.
You say, oh, thanks for asking. I'm the rapid growth guy. And then they will ask for two reasons. One is that you invested so much into them that they want you to explain just because you gave them so much value in their time, in your energy, in your passion, in your care, and sometimes in the relationships you've recommended you'll give them. But secondly, because their brain's going to have a malfunction, and now the psychology of who we are as people likes to put people in boxes. So I need to know what the rapid growth guy is now so I can work out whether I disqualify you or whether it's something that I absolutely need. But I can't just go, oh, that's interesting, right? If you say you're in marketing, I can really just say, oh, that's nice, and move on with my day. But if you say you're the rapid growth guy, the authority architect, the narrative strategist, I have to inquire further. Then you can do what I call creating your planned, not elevator spiel, because that sounds contrived for the average introvert. It's a conversation where you talk about your unique passion and mission and then interrupt yourself and lead into a story, because stories are scientifically proven to activate the reticular activating system of our brain. It creates artificial rapport, which introverts are amazing at turning into deep rapport. People remember up to 22 times more information. But the introvert that generally opens up that fire hose of information that overwhelms people, it restricts you from doing that. But also, it short circuits the logical mind. The same reason why people will watch a documentary for 60 seconds before they get bored, but listen to a 3-hour movie and still be engaged, is story speaks to the emotional mind, same as great movies do. And because of that, it keeps people on the edge of their seat as you're talking to them. So the goal really is to go in, ideally, to speak to someone you've already met beforehand by connecting with them, and then asking questions, being interested, giving value, and then delivering what you already have planned to say in an organic way when they ask, and only when they ask. And I guarantee they will.
See, that's fascinating. And this is one of the reasons that, I think introverts are very powerful, because naturally, I think that's a comfortable path, because we don't want to talk about ourselves. We'd rather just ask you questions anyway. Where at the same time, you said introverts, I believe you said, create deeper connections as well.
Absolutely. They do. They do.
And what I love about this is it's not the elevator pitch where they're like, oh, you need to come up with your elevator pitch, right? 30 seconds or less, pitch me. And we're like, oh God, that just feels icky, right? I don't like it. But this is a fantastic, for everybody listening, this is a fantastic methodology, because this is in our wheelhouse, right? You get to have a deeper conversation. People love to talk about themselves, right? If you ask questions and show interest, and that's going to lead you down a path to a deeper relationship where they then want to know about you.
Absolutely. We've done this with people that we gave insurance people a bad rap before.
Yeah.
I worked with an insurance person, and he was like, oh, I just want to sell more insurance, but they look at me and their eyes are screaming the moment they hear it. We changed his branding into the Hustler Lifeguard. We talked about his passion and mission for helping people not get into unhappy retirements like his grandfather did, who lost his farm. And then all of a sudden, people are on the edge of their seats going, oh my gosh, I need this. Yeah. And everything shifted. But actually, let me segue into one more important topic, because I think this will really help a lot of introverts that are listening, which is introverts often believe, well, everybody believes networking is about sales. In truth, if you're going to networking events because you need a customer today, sure, you have to have that mindset. But you should be networking before you ever get to that place. And networking is actually not about it. Firstly, you should never sell in the room. I do this role play with a lot of my clients, and I'll be like role playing with you, Derek, and we'll have a dialogue, and I'll be like, oh, that's really interesting. How do I work with you? And then you start explaining it to me, and I'm like, oh, Tom, I'm so glad to see you. And I simulate you getting interrupted. And I'm like, in a networking room, you should never sell in the room, because that's not what it's for. So when they leave, they won't appreciate that you did it. But secondly, you get rushed, you're going to get interrupted. And thirdly, they'll appreciate you saying, look, I really appreciate you asking, Derek, but now's not the right time to discuss that. Plus, I'd love to know a little bit more about you before I suggest what we would do. Let's set up a coffee, a Zoom meeting, whatever that works out to be. Now, The other two people, so these are the prospects, and this is what everyone thinks networking is about. For me, this is your ticket for getting stuck in the hamster wheel of that feast and famine of finding interested prospects, setting yourself apart and making a sale. The two groups, I should say, that get you out of that are what I call momentum partner relationships and champion relationships. Momentum partner relationships are people that believe in what you do and want to introduce you to everybody they know. They'll be on a podcast with you, Derek, and they'll say, you know what, have you heard about Matthew? I think he's fantastic. Or they'll be speaking to a bunch of boards of directors and they'll say, you know what, you should have Matthew on your board. Because they're doing it for you, you're also doing it for them. Not because you've got a tit-for-tat contract with them, but because you both genuinely believe in the work that they do. You know, when I first moved to the US, I met Judy Robinette, and she started introducing me to podcast interviews because I gave her some advice on how to close speaking events over the phone. And then I started introducing her to podcast interviews. I literally have booked over 50 podcast interviews because she has introduced me. And I would say that I've done at least the same for her. Not that I'm keeping track, but we just have that relationship where we believe in each other's work. That if you get 4 or 5 momentum partners in your family, in your organization, wow, your organization will explode. And then the highest level group is what I call champions. These champions are the people that give you credibility. For instance, Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, gives my work credibility. He's like, Matt I created a networking system that built structure by making BNI. Matthew took that structure to every other networking event. That credibility can only come from someone that high level. Mm-hmm. That's one of my champions. If you can meet a few champions that support you because they believe in what you do, and you know, sometimes you can give them advice because they're not experts in everything. They're experts in what their specific field is. You can always give them something, even if, you know, it's just being excited for their achievements with not asking for anything in return. You'll be blown away at how often they'll offer to do things for you. If you get a series of momentum partners and champions, your life is set. Now, what I find is when people go to networking rooms, they're looking for prospects. Mm-hmm. If I was to say, hey, do your research, you'll be doing your research for, I think that person will buy, I think that person will buy. When I go to a networking room, I'm like, where are my potential partners that could believe in what I do? Who else are involved in that same group and passion and mission? Sure. And then who are the high level influencers? If I get that group, I'll settle for a prospect, but my preference is those every day of the week.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. I mean, you're saying find the right people, give them a lot of value, and voila, they could reciprocate and help you grow.
Absolutely. Do your research, find the right people, have the right conversations, give them value, and then don't sell. I mean, as an introvert, doesn't it feel good to know your goal is not going into a networking room to sell? That's the whole focus. Totally. If you go in and you don't have that transactional mindset and you just want to foster relationships, you don't have to feel inauthentic because you're literally going there in a way that introverts love to behave, helping people.
Fantastic. That's amazing. All right. Look, this has been awesome. I mean, I could talk about this all day. That said, we're almost out of time. So I want all of the introverts that are listening here to be able to connect with you, to learn from you, because I think we've just scratched the surface here. Before we wrap up, where can they go to find you and connect and learn?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would suggest, I mean, we talked about creating the unified message, and I believe that's something that everybody needs to do. So there's actually a free resource at matthewpollard.com/growth. It actually gives you a 5-step template where you can create a unified message and discover your niche. And I have to tell you, I did this at the National Freelance Conference, nearly 200 people in the room. And at the end, I said, put your hand up if you now have a message that you believe will excite and inspire your version of the China Success Coach, the Rapid Growth Guy, and you've identified your niche. Literally 97% of the room put their hands up. Sad part was, I said, keep your hand up if this is the most time you spent on marketing since you started your business. Like 85% of the room kept their hands up. This whole thing was 45 minutes long. So go to matthewpollard.com/growth, download that template, partner up with someone because you'll get stuck in your head. Spend an hour on them, direct them to this podcast and get them to listen to it so they know why they're doing it. Do an hour on them, get them to do an hour on you, and your business will be different. But I'd also suggest, go to theintrovertsedge.com/networking, and you'll be able to download the first chapter of my book, The Introvert's Edge to Networking. Now, my publisher hates me when I say this. You don't need to buy my books. I mean, the first chapter literally outlines the strategy. It'll help you overcome your beliefs that you can network as an introvert. So just go to that chapter, download that chapter and get started there. And you can also also check out at theintrovertsedge.com the first chapter of my first book. And I guarantee if you literally just grab the chapter headings, put what you currently say into it, you'll realize there's a bunch of things you say you shouldn't be saying to clients, a bunch of things out of order and a bunch of things missing. You fix that, you'll double your sales easily in the next 60 days.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Oh, and you also have a podcast as well. So we got to put a plug in there for that. Your podcast is
It's the Introvert's Edge. We try and keep the name simple, right?
Perfect. Yes, there's a theme there. That's awesome. So, we got people listening to podcasts. Go check it out as well. Subscribe to that one while you're at it. So again, Matthew, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you just unconditionally sharing your experience, wisdom, and knowledge. My absolute pleasure, Derek. Thanks for having me on. Fantastic. All right, everybody. I hope you guys got a lot out of this episode, particularly all the introverts listening. No, you're not alone. There is hope for us interviews. In fact, there's more than hope. And again, if this is something you've struggled with, I would really encourage you to check out all of the resources Matthew just shared with us. And as always, you will find any links that we mentioned on our show notes at projectignite.com. So go check that out. If you missed any of the links, they will be there. And now it's time for you to apply the final essential ingredient to actually getting some results with the stuff you learned here today, and that is action, right? So if you've been struggling on the network, take action, follow his strategies, go sign up for an event, start practicing, and you will get results. And well, folks, that's a wrap, and we will see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to another info-packed episode of the Project Ignite podcast with Derek Gale.
Any links mentioned, along with an entire transcript of this episode, can be found at projectignite.com/podcast.
And to make sure you never miss another episode, go to iTunes or SoundCloud now and subscribe.